On a recent live broadcast, Hall of Famer Reggie Miller compared Caitlin Clark, one of the most significant prospects in basketball history, to a bench player.
He took a little sneak diss shot at Caitlin Clark, in my opinion.
Is there like a comparison of someone either you played with or you guys watching the game right now?
A lot like this young lady right here. I like Payton Pritchard from Boston, the way he's able to handle the basketball. He makes big shots when the shot clock's.
It would be Luka for me. The way that you're able to play in that open court, to see the vision that you have, to be able to pull up across half court. You keep the defense, keeping them in jail, and then understand how to operate out of that. You have it. You have it.
If I was Caitlin Clark, I would have just walked off at that point. Caitlin Clark is the Michael Jordan of the WNBA, at least in her importance to that league.
The comment has generated significant friction within the sports world, as Miller, a legendary shooter known for his clutch performances, appeared to misjudge the standing of the WNBA's newest star. Critics have characterized the remark not merely as a technical misfire, but as a calculated attempt to diminish Clark's status at the height of her visibility. The specifics of the comparison have drawn particular scrutiny. When asked to identify an NBA equivalent for Clark's game, Miller bypassed high-level stars like Stephen Curry or Damian Lillard. Instead, he compared the player responsible for record-breaking television ratings to Payton Pritchard of the Boston Celtics. Pritchard is a respected rotation player and a contributor to a championship roster, but he remains a role player, often ranked well outside the league's top 50 talents. Comparing Clark to Pritchard is akin to equating a high-performance sports car with a reliable sedan. While the latter has utility, it is not the primary draw for a global audience. The optics of the exchange were further complicated by the fact that Clark was present on the set during the comparison. She remained composed, though the interaction was visibly awkward. While most athletes of her caliber might have reacted with open frustration, Clark maintained her professionalism. The incident has led many to question Miller's intent, wondering whether he was attempting to provide a grounding perspective or if there were personal motivations behind the critique. One prevailing theory points to the legacy of Miller's sister, Cheryl Miller. For decades, Cheryl has been regarded as the definitive figure in women's basketball. As Caitlin Clark continues to break records once held by the previous generation and garners unprecedented media attention, some observers suggest that Reggie Miller may be speaking in defense of his family's historical standing. By framing Clark as a role player rather than a superstar, Miller appears to be engaging in a form of gatekeeping that stands in contrast to Clark's actual achievements on the court. The contrast in commentary on that same set was sharp. Carmelo Anthony compared Clark's play style to that of Luka Doncic, a perennial MVP candidate and global brand. That comparison aligns with Clark's role as a ball-dominant playmaker. Miller, however, selected a player that many casual fans would struggle to identify without assistance. This choice is seen by some as a humbling tactic, an effort to shrink the perceived impact of a player who has already changed the financial and cultural trajectory of her league. This is not the first time Miller's professional conduct has been questioned. Critics have revisited past incidents, including a 2008 controversy involving the alleged use of a private investigator following a personal dispute. To some, these patterns suggest a difficulty in navigating situations where Miller is not the primary focus, or when the sport evolves beyond his era. This friction is part of a broader trend among veteran athletes. Draymond Green, for instance, has recently used his own platforms to express grievances that many find disconnected from his status as a highly compensated professional. Green's recent claims of being marginalized during an on-court confrontation with an official echo the same perceived bitterness found in Miller's commentary. There is a growing sense that a segment of the old guard is struggling to reconcile their own legacies with the influence of the current generation. The reality remains that the landscape of basketball is shifting. Caitlin Clark's influence is quantified by sold-out arenas, massive media rights deals, and record-breaking jersey sales. Miller had the opportunity to use his platform to validate this growth and officially pass the torch. Instead, his attempt to minimize her impact has largely backfired with the public. Regardless of Miller's assessment, Clark continues to operate at a level that transcends the role-player comparisons he offered. As the new era of the game takes hold, the veteran voices who fail to acknowledge the greatness in front of them may find themselves increasingly sidelined by the very history they helped create. The disparity between Caitlin Clark's on-court production and the Payton Pritchard comparison becomes even more pronounced when examining the statistical record. During her debut season, Clark did not merely perform well for a rookie. She set the all-time WNBA record for assists in a single season and became the first rookie in league history to record a triple-double. Pritchard, while a vital component of the Boston Celtics championship rotation, has averaged fewer than 7 points per game over his career and has never been a primary option on a professional roster. By selecting Pritchard as a point of reference, Miller disregarded the fundamental difference between a developmental role player and a franchise cornerstone who leads the league in multiple statistical categories. This choice in framing suggests a refusal to acknowledge the gravity of Clark's performance, opting instead to categorize her within the narrow confines of a high-energy substitute. The branding implications of this comparison are equally significant. When Carmelo Anthony linked Clark's game to that of Luka Doncic, he was referencing a specific archetype of basketball, a high-usage, ball-dominant playmaker capable of manipulating entire defenses. Doncic is a perennial All-NBA first-team selection and a global face of the sport. His brand is built on the premise of individual excellence driving team success, which mirrors the burden Clark carries for her franchise. Pritchard's brand, by contrast, is rooted in the blue-collar secondary unit. For a broadcaster with Miller's experience, to choose the latter indicates a deliberate effort to separate Clark from the elite tier of basketball icons. This is seen by analysts as an attempt to minimize her commercial and cultural footprint at a time when her name is synonymous with the rapid expansion of the WNBA's market share. This trend of minimization is often viewed through the lens of the Miller family legacy. Cheryl Miller's dominance in the 1980s is the historical benchmark for women's basketball. She remains the only player to have her jersey retired at USC and is frequently cited as the most talented individual to ever play the game. However, the modern era has brought a level of scrutiny and statistical transparency that did not exist during Cheryl's tenure. Clark's pursuit of scoring and assist records has invited direct comparisons that some legacy figures find uncomfortable. There is an observable tension when a new figure threatens to supersede a long-standing historical narrative. In Reggie Miller's case, the public perception is that his commentary serves as a protective barrier around his sister's status. By asserting that Clark is comparable to a rotation player, he effectively argues that she has not yet reached the god-tier status occupied by his sister, despite the overwhelming evidence of her impact on the modern game. This behavior fits into a broader pattern of what critics describe as legacy gatekeeping. The transition of former players into media roles has created a dynamic where the old guard often evaluates new talent based on the standards of a previous era. This frequently manifests as a reluctance to grant superstar status to younger players until they have endured years of professional struggle. However, the economic reality of the WNBA has moved faster than the commentary. The league's decision to implement charter flights and the surge in ticket prices across every arena Clark visits are indicators of a shift that traditional analysis has struggled to keep up with. When Miller suggests that Clark is a role player, he is ignoring the financial data that proves she is the primary driver of the league's current valuation. The narrative surrounding Miller's objectivity is further complicated by his own history of professional and personal conduct. The 2008 incident involving the surveillance of a private citizen remains a point of reference for those questioning his temperament. Reports from that period detailed a situation where Miller allegedly hired a private investigator to track a woman following a personal disagreement. For critics, this historical context suggests a person who reacts poorly to perceived slights or situations where he lacks control. Applying this to his current role as a broadcaster, it suggests that his critiques of Clark may not be rooted in objective basketball analysis, but in a reactive stance toward a player who has captured the spotlight in a way that he or even his sister did not during their active careers. This reactionary tone is not unique to Miller. Draymond Green's recent commentary on his own podcast has highlighted a similar disconnect between veteran players and the current landscape of the sport. Green has frequently used his platform to frame himself as a victim of institutional bias, even as he remains one of the most highly compensated and visible players in the league. When Green claims to be marginalized after a routine officiating dispute, it mirrors the bitter energy observers see in Miller's dismissal of Clark. Both athletes represent a demographic of pampered veterans who appear increasingly defensive as a new generation of talent gains leverage. They are navigating a world where they are no longer the sole arbiters of what constitutes greatness, and the resulting commentary often feels like a desperate attempt to maintain relevance. The long-term impact of this approach on Miller's broadcasting career is notable. A color commentator's primary responsibility is to provide context and elevate the game for the viewer. When a narrator actively works against the reality of what the audience is seeing, they lose credibility. Fans watching Clark score 30 points and record double-digit assists cannot reconcile that performance with the description of a Payton Pritchard-type player. This creates a friction that alienates the viewer and positions the broadcaster as out of touch. The irony is that Miller, who was once the face of the new era of three-point shooting, has now become the voice of a traditionalist faction that seems intimidated by progress. Furthermore, the comparison to Pritchard ignores the sheer physical and mental burden placed on Clark. As a rookie, she faced the most aggressive defensive schemes in the league, often being double-teamed the moment she crossed half-court. This is a level of defensive attention reserved for the league's premier stars, not its role player. Pritchard operates primarily in the space created by stars like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Clark, conversely, is the one creating that space for her teammate. By failing to acknowledge this fundamental difference in basketball gravity, Miller's analysis falls short of the professional standard expected of a Hall of Fame broadcaster. It suggests a lack of preparation, or more pointedly, a lack of respect for the technical proficiency required to lead a professional team at 22 years old. The gatekeeping currently observed in basketball commentary often stems from a fear of obsolescence. As the WNBA enters a period of unprecedented growth, the traditional power structures of the basketball media are being challenged. New voices and new platforms are providing a more nuanced look at the game, bypassing the legacy broadcasters who rely on outdated tropes. Miller's insistence on humbling Clark on live television is a reflection of this struggle. He is attempting to apply a 1990s locker room mentality to a 2024 media environment, and the results have been largely detrimental to his reputation. Ultimately, the trajectory of Caitlin Clark's career will not be determined by the comparisons made on a television set. Her impact is already solidified in the record books and the league's financial statement. However, the incident serves as a case study in the decline of legacy media objectivity. When personal biases and family legacies are allowed to dictate the narrative, the quality of sports journalism suffers. For Reggie Miller, the choice to diminish Clark's achievements may provide a temporary sense of protection for the past, but it distances him from the future of the sport. As the new guard continues to redefine what is possible on the court, the old guard must decide whether they will participate in that growth or continue to offer critiques that the rest of the world has already moved past. The real question is no longer about Clark's ceiling, but about whether the figures of the past are capable of recognizing greatness when it is standing directly in front of them.